Welcome to Levels of Connection, where we discuss how human connections work and why they're so important. Welcome to Levels of Connection. Today's episode, I'm speaking with Androulla Soteri. Amazing discussion, really interesting. One of the key things that I'm taking away is the way that Androulla described how identifying her own values has helped her or enabled her to connect better, both in the workplace and on a personal basis, and how she connects that as Chief People Officer with her mission to how she can enable better connections and take better care of the mental well-being of her colleagues in the workplace. Really interesting episode. Enjoy. Androulla, welcome to Levels of Connection.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Really good to have you. And to introduce you to our viewers and listeners, you're a Chief People Officer. You're also a chartered accountant, a speaker, a trainer, and a leadership coach. It's really interesting with a lot of experiences across the globe. Really good to have you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation.
And talking about connections, what does even connecting mean to you? Let's start from there.
Oh, I mean, connecting to me is all about being open and available to another person, but also having that person be open and available to you. So it's like a two-way street. That's what connection means to me. And you only get true connection, I believe, where you have that happening in both directions. And if it's one-sided, where someone is not being truly open, truly available, then I think that leads to a strained connection or an incomplete connection. And that, yeah, I mean, I believe there's different levels of connection as well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you have things like superficial connections versus emotional connections versus visceral connections, as far as I'm concerned. I think the superficial connections are the ones that are very surface level interaction based and they lack depth. And actually, I believe probably about 70% of our connections in life are superficial in terms of the people that we interact with, whether it's people we have a casual conversation with in the street or someone we work with on a day-to-day basis. They have the potential to be superficial connections. And actually, I think the majority of them are. Emotional connections run deeper, obviously. So they're experienced when people share feelings and thoughts and experiences. And then I believe there's something that goes beyond that as well, that is like a gut kind of connection, a visceral connection that people have. And I think, you know, if I'm this is the chartered accountant in me. So, you know, the superficial is the 70%.
Go, let her loose.
I'll let her loose. I think we have probably 20% emotional connections and 10% visceral connections. And so that really deep gut thing, I think, is generally quite rare. And the majority of our connections are actually superficial. And I think the thing that drives that superficiality is the lack of the psychological contract. And what I mean by the psychological contract is to have a true connection, you need to display authenticity. There needs to be safety in the situation. I'm going to use a coaching term now as well. There needs to be unconditional positive regard present as well. And you need to be comfortable with bringing your whole self to a situation. And what I mean by that is, like, I struggle to connect with people where I feel they're filtering things. Like, I really like people that feel comfortable to be completely open with me and comfortable talking about any aspect of their life, even the aspects that sometimes people feel might be socially tricky or difficult to share. But in order for me to enable someone to feel comfortable in that space, they need to feel like they can trust me.
How do you And that's a great point. Sorry to interrupt. I was just while you were describing that, how do you balance that in the daily hustle and bustle of the business world and work?
It's an excellent question. And I think this came up for me when I was working with a coach.
Mm,
And the reason it came up is because I was facing challenges with people at work.
mm,
You know, I consider myself someone that can get along with anyone. I can literally have a conversation with anyone. Stranger walking down the street, the person I'm sitting next to on the train, um, you name it. I love connecting. I love speaking with people. I love getting to know people. I was about to say I love connecting with people, but it's true. And then when I struggle to find that connection with someone, or where I feel like it's sitting at that superficial level, which is when, and that's tricky, when it's sitting at the superficial level with someone that you work with on a day-to-day basis, you're reliant on them for collaboration, for accountability. When it's sitting at a superficial level, it can be a really difficult and actually very draining situation to be in, a relationship to have. And what I did is I worked with a coach to determine what my values were, and that was an incredibly powerful exercise for me. And it might not be powerful for other people. I'm an overthinker, so something like this is great for me. I thrive off that. But determining what my values were, and believe it or not, I have 12, and some are more significant than others for me.
mm.
But it helped me to understand partly why I struggled to connect with certain individuals. And it was because where their values don't align with mine,
Mm.
I find it very difficult to build that emotional connection. And that is very insightful for me in terms of the work environment, and helping me to understand why I'm struggling to connect with certain individuals over others. And then it enables me to flex my approach with that individual to help me to take a different avenue to build a connection, I suppose. But what's likely is that is always going to stay at the superficial level.
How did that exercise that you mentioned help
Mm.
you to interact with people that in the past you had more difficulty connecting with?
I mean, I think it's more of an acceptance that you're
Mm,
not going to be able to fix the situation.
mm.
And I am a fixer. Every problem has a solution. That's
You
my
got to
mindset.
balance it, right? You got to
You do
balance
have
it.
to balance it. And sometimes you need to accept that there are some relationships that are just never going to be the way that you would like them to be.
Mm,
And that is also partly because that other person is not bringing the psychological contract to the situation. You both need to bring that. And so it's just acceptance of, this is just one of those situations where it's never going to change. And actually, where you have that, we talk about things like burnout in the work environment, and mental well-being. These are the things that can impact your
mm,
burnout, your mental well-being.
yeah.
Um, and sometimes that might be an indication that it's time to move on as well.
It's really interesting. And you are, from your position as chief people officer, you can actually have a real impact on these things. How do you approach it from that hat, let's say, to have a positive impact and help people either with potential burnout or other symptoms?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of why I love the job I'm doing so much right now, is that um, I'm hoping what I bring to the situation is an umbrella over what we typically think of in the people space as HR.
Mm,
And HR is a lot around sort of compliance. But what I'm hoping I'm bringing, especially with my training background as well, is some of the softer aspects of looking after your people in an organization. And so that does include, whether it's, having a focus on mental well-being and how we manage mental well-being in the workplace, to how we roll out training in relation to mental well-being, whether it's to help people manage their own mental well-being or whether it's to help leaders enhance their emotional intelligence to be in a better place to be able to support and manage individuals' well-being in the workplace as well. And so I'm hoping my role is something that, or what I'm hoping to be able to do in my role, because, I've just joined a new place, which is very exciting. And we've got some very exciting things on the cards, but it's to be able to bring some of that softer, more less tangible stuff to the work environment that helps support people and get a better experience out of work and enjoy what they're doing on a day-to-day basis a little bit more.
How do you face people that are all about, businesses obviously have to, produce results and targets quarterly, monthly, annually, etc. And you're going to be the one that's going to be dragging them out of their meetings, their business meetings, and taking them into training sessions, reflection sessions, retreats, understand your people better, talk to your people, communicate with them. How do you speak to the people that don't recognize that side of humanity and of business?
Yeah, that can be really challenging. And I think it depends on the workplace that you're in from a cultural perspective, whether there is the right mindset to adopt. I don't want to say softer ways of working, but to embrace putting people first rather than profits first as part of what they do. So, if you're working in an organization where leadership is on board, it's great, because rolling things out is relatively straightforward, and engaging people to adopt new mindsets can be relatively straightforward. It can be really tricky, though, when leadership is not on board. But I think times are changing as well.
Yeah.
Like, God, it's really cliche for me to say it, but things are very different since COVID in a positive way. Obviously, lots of negatives as well, but in a positive way. I think this is one of the good things that's come out of COVID, is that we're far more open to approaching how we run our organizations slightly differently than we were before. And so people are comfortable to bring things into the workplace that they wouldn't necessarily have done before, because they believed it should be compartmentalized.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do so much compartmentalizing anymore in the workplace, because it's become more socially acceptable. So I guess part of what I'm appealing through this today as well is to say, you can have both. You can have profitability, and you can dedicate time to thinking about how you're treating your people and how your people are developing and how you're ensuring their well-being in the workplace. The two, it's not even that the two can coexist. They have to coexist, because if you look after your people look after your organization. And
Why does it have to be either or?
It isn't.
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you have both, you've got the magic wand, essentially. And you should be seeking both.
Talking about connections, and you mentioned the different levels of connection, and the first one is connecting with ourselves. What are some of the practices that you have for connecting with yourself?
So I do a lot of self-reflection. A lot of self-reflection. As I said before, I'm an overthinker. Being truly connected with yourself is about really tuning into your own needs. And that's especially important when you're a person that's naturally inclined towards putting other people before you put yourself. And that's something I'm predisposed to doing as well. I have a tendency to prioritize other people before myself. And I've worked on that over the years. I think over the last kind of 10 or so years, I've really worked at that. And that's really important because I need to be in a good headspace. I'm a single mother. I'm a full-time working single mother. So I really need to have a good understanding of my own needs so that I don't fall apart. So tuning into my own needs, really knowing myself, really understanding myself is really important. And truly understanding my own thoughts and feelings. So really getting behind and processing my feelings and coming to a conclusion on those feelings. And I suppose that work I've done there has led to me being able to have more rational responses in life. So better at self-regulation, being able to cope with the world better generally, especially in stressful situations, and just having better mental well-being.
You mentioned you do reflect, and do you have, for people that would be watching, do you have like a daily routine or something that people could use that you recommend?
I can't say I have a daily routine. I'd be lying if I said that. But what I would say is, on a periodic basis, when it gets very intense for me, when I get to points where there's a lot going on, there's lots of stressful situations, there's processing that I need to do. And this isn't for everyone, but I write things down. I because there's so much going on in here. Like if anyone looked inside my brain, they would just think it was an absolute mess. There's so much going on there. And writing things down is a helpful way for me to organize my thoughts. And as I said, that's not for everyone, but I would invite you to try it if you're open to trying new things. Because writing things down is another level, is the next level of processing from the disorganization that's going on in your mind. And it gives you a new perspective to see things from. And you have moments where you write something, you think, oh, I didn't realize that's actually what I was thinking or feeling. That's really interesting. It's insightful for yourself. So I do recommend that. I think that's helpful and something people should try.
Thank you. With your experience being a single mother, what are the challenges that, if there are any challenges, connecting in the business world?
So I think I'm increasingly getting more open about the fact that I'm a single mother in the work environment. And I think I've been a single mother for a very long time, 12 years. And I think in the beginning, I would keep it quite quiet. I was very concerned about the stigma attached to, frankly, being divorced, let alone being a single mother. I was concerned about the impact it would have on my career progression, whether I would be overlooked for opportunities or challenges, because it would be perceived that I wouldn't be able to dedicate enough time or the right amount of time as someone who didn't necessarily have that same level of responsibility as me. And over time, especially when I was surrounding myself with leaders where I felt connected to those leaders and able to bring my true self to the workplace, I became comfortable to be more open about that. I do think there have been instances, though, where that has inhibited my ability to progress in certain situations. So I think it has been strongly defined by the type of leader that I've been reporting into. Has it stopped me from building connections? Actually, no. I think it's probably thinking broader than leadership now. I think it's probably something that's enabled me to build connections. And actually, this is something that I found when I first got divorced, because I got divorced at quite a young age. It was so interesting to see the number of people that would approach me and start opening up to me about challenges they were facing in their marriages and their relationships. Because they felt comfortable talking to me about that, because I'd been brave to be open and honest about it. And because I didn't sugarcoat things as well. I think that's so damaging when people sugarcoat difficult situations. And I worry about that. I worry that sometimes people look at me and think, single mom, full-time job, really good job. How does she do it? My goodness. And believe me, it has not been easy. There are so many challenges I've faced along the way. And I don't want anyone to ever look and think, wow, she, it was so easy for her. Why can't I do that? What's wrong with me? No, absolutely not. Having a network around you is hugely important. I could not have done this without the village that is my family, that has enabled me to leave my son with them so that I could pursue certain things, the late nights at work or the networking opportunities. But again, I come back to that authenticity, create that safe environment where people feel that they can come to you and you build connections. And actually, as a result of that, you build so much loyalty from people as well. I will do anything for that person as well as them doing anything for me too. And that is also part of a secret of the success.
Yeah. But what advice would you give yourself, 12 years ago when you first got divorced?
Yeah. Don't care about what people think. It took me a bit of time to work that out. And I'm really annoyed at how long it took me to work that out. But I'm at the polar opposite end of that now. And I don't know whether that's a product of, the decades that I'm in now. I'm in my 40s. And, I think naturally you just care less what people think once you hit your 40s. But yeah, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter what other people think. And as long as you are doing the right thing, but by yourself, your child, and other people, integrity has such a big role to play in life.
What does that word mean to you?
My goodness, it is one of the most important words in my life. One of my values, one of my 12 values that I mentioned before as well. And that's actually one of my top 3. Integrity is a huge thing for me, and I do think that's a product of my upbringing, my parents. They just have so much integrity. They will always choose to do the right thing rather than the thing that involves self-interest. And that's something I strongly believe in as well. So I hope that I always choose to do the right thing rather than the right thing for me. Because there's a number of stakeholders. There's not just shareholders, there's stakeholders. And so integrity is a huge thing for me. And again, this comes back to the connection point. Once I feel like the integrity I thought I was seeing in someone, I can no longer see it. Once that's lost, that connection has dropped from emotional to superficial for me as well.
Does that happen often?
Define often. I think more often than I would like, because of just how high I hold that value. And I suppose one of my flaws is that there are so many things that it's probably the wrong way to structure that sentence. Sorry, I'm trying to organize my thoughts.
It's all good. It's all good.
And I've completely lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. What were we talking
That's
about again?
fine. That's
All
fine.
over the
We
place.
we were talking about integrity. We were talking about how often do you experience connections or relationships that you lose that sense of integrity from that relationship.
So one of my flaws, thank you, I'm back on track. One of my flaws is that my standards are so high, especially for myself, but also, I suppose, what I expect from other people, that it's easy for people to sometimes falter on the integrity piece because I've got such high standards by which I measure things, which I'm working on. No one's perfect.
It's all a work in progress, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, what's your reflection so far from what we've been discussing today? We've got some more time. I'm curious to see what you're coming up with.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I was expecting to go. I mean, I'm an authentic person. I tend to be very open. I'm an open book, but I don't think I was expecting to go as raw as I went. So that's interesting. But again, that's part of what building connection is, because I know that.
And you're modeling it for the people that are watching as well. So
that's it. I know that this is going to go to an audience.
Yeah.
I suppose I want people to come out of this believing that there are things they can do to build better connections. And I feel very strongly about the bring your whole self to a situation, be authentic, have unconditional positive regard, because without that, people don't feel safe to share things with you and build connection. And just the world is a better place when you've got true connections. Yeah. I think the thing that's letting our society down is the superficiality of so many things.
So some of the habits that people could develop around connecting are what the key points that you just mentioned right now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think, as I said, one of the powerful exercises for me has been that identifying my values. And it sounds like a bit of a tedious thing to do, but I challenge people to think about what their values might be, list them out, see if you can get to as many as 12.
And how will that help them? And
because,
yeah,
because if you understand your values, well, this is my experience. Okay, this is not some deeply researched theory. This is my experience. If you
we're talking about you, it's all about you. So it's it's no need to put any disclaimers.
If you understand your values, or I found that when I understood my values, I then understood why there were certain people that I struggled to connect with. I then appreciated that it was a problem sometimes that I was never going to be able to fix. And it enabled me to consciously remove myself from toxic situations and put myself into healthier situations.
So what can I venture to say that you were probably blaming yourself, and then you got a tool to understand that, oh, wow, this is why I'm reacting like that. It's not about me, it's about them. Or is that is it a different way?
No, I think that's completely right. I think it's a tool that does help you stop internalizing and blaming yourself for everything that you can't fix. Sometimes there are just things that are outside of your control. And I suppose if your brain is quite formulaic in the way in which it operates, and mine is, that formula was really helpful for me. That kind of fit in with the way my view of the world, right? My view of the world is formulaic.
Yeah.
So that was very helpful to me. And I just want to make it clear that this applies to all areas of life. I'm not talking exclusively about work. I'm not talking exclusively about home life or friendships. It applies to all facets of life. It is a very deep and exhausting level of thinking, though, sometimes as well.
What do you do to connect with the less thinking part of yourself?
So the less thinking part of myself and my heart and my gut. So less my brain, more my heart and my gut. Yeah, I'd say that's a work in progress for me as well.
Okay.
So again, like, no one's perfect. And I hope anyone that does things like this, or people that do things like this, it's really frustrating when they give this image of perfection and are not open about their flaws.
Mm-hmm.
I try to challenge myself on a daily basis to do more thinking with my heart and my gut rather than my head. Because it definitely has the capacity to lead you to happier moments in life. Because not everything's logical.
Of course.
Not everything can be reasoned. And certainly things that involve emotions can't be reasoned as well. They're irrational. Emotions are not always rational. They're often irrational as well.
For somebody that would be watching this episode, what would you suggest for them to do an hour after they've watched the episode around connecting?
Determine your values. Because I bet they've never been challenged to do that before. I bet loads of people have been told, go away and journal, or, pick 5 people to reach out to. That is a superficial function. Get deep down, understand yourself better. I think when you understand yourself better and you're comfortable with yourself, I think that facilitates building stronger connections. What do you think?
It's all about you. It's not about me today. How are you connecting as a child?
Children don't connect. All right? This is the reality. But let me break that down. I think as babies, and probably up until the age of maybe 8 or 9, our only connections are with our immediate family, so present family, mother, father, siblings. You hate your siblings, but you truly love them deeply.
You love them later, right?
You love them later. Well, sometimes you love them immediately.
Yeah.
You have connections, true connections there as a child. I don't think children have true connections in friendships. And I know people will be outraged at me saying this.
It's your point of view, so...
I think friendships are very flaky as a child. They come and go, you dip in and out. They change over time. And actually, I do believe that you start losing the connection with your parents as a child as well. I think when children start hitting, and what's terrifying is that my son is about to enter this phase. This is really scary for me. I think when you hit sort of the secondary school age, sort of 11, 12, and where your brain has developed to a point where you are now assessing whether everything your parents have been teaching you and telling you in life is true or not, and whether you actually believe it. You're thinking independently about it. This is the point at which you start to doubt your parents, and whether consciously or subconsciously, it impacts your connection with them. And we've all seen it as parents. How many parents have I heard with late teen kids say, I just don't know what to do. I'm tearing my hair out. I can't get through to my child. And then that goes full circle once their adult child hits sort of their early 20s. And I remember going through this myself. I mean, a huge amount of respect for my parents. I love them to bits. I always did. But you do, as you go through your teenage years, you question everything. You question how true it was. And then it's only once you get to your mid-20s where you think, oh, I get it now. I get why they did that. That now makes sense. They weren't just doing it to spite me. They were actually just being really good parents. And I do think as children, again, our connections are very superficial as children. And I think it comes with emotional intelligence. It comes with maturity. And I think even with people where you've been friends since you were young and at school, that connection only goes from superficial to emotional once you hit a certain age and a certain level of maturity, where, you know, all those other pillars that I was talking about before actually come into play, and you have that true connection with that person.
Interesting, really interesting perspective. And I know that you're very busy with all the hats that you're wearing, and I really appreciate you taking the time today
Pleasure.
and participating. But I want, what are your last thoughts today before we go?
I think my last thought is linked to that last question, actually. As a parent, the most important role we have in our children's lives, apart from feeding them, keep a roof over their head, keep them safe, build their self-esteem. Children that have high self-esteem will be able to get to those emotional connections, out of those superficial connections into those emotional connections quicker and with better quality people. And that will be better for their mental well-being in the long run as well. So as a parent, I think most important thing is build up your child's self-esteem.
Thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And there's always an open invitation, to do the next one in Cyprus. So when you're going to be, I know you come to Cyprus. So next time we'll record it here in person.
In a few weeks, I'm hoping. I've got to get away from this grey weather we've got in London at the moment.
I'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for watching another episode of Levels of Connection, and thank you for your continuous support. Go ahead and share your comments below as to what you found useful today. See you soon.